You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre, and I'm here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News. And today, we're very happy to introduce Assemblymember Michaelle Solages, who has represented New York's 22nd Assembly District on Long Island since 2012, which covers parts of western Nassau County from South Valley Stream and North Woodmere through Floral Park. Assemblywoman Solages is both the Assembly Deputy Majority Leader and Chair of the New York State Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus, as well as the first person of Haitian descent to be elected into the New York State Legislature. And she joins us now. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Good to see you as well, and thank you for the opportunity. It's amazing to be on your show.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your time, and we know you had a very busy close to the Albany session, and there's a lot of things, obviously, from the pandemic that you guys, have handled throughout the last year and a half or so. So that's what we'll probably start with, which we normally do with elected. Just kind of your thoughts, maybe in recap, coming from, where we were with the testing phase to now, obviously a lot better kind of infection rate, but still dealing with vaccine hesitancy and the economic recovery. I know your office, has been involved in all aspects of that. So if you could just give us your thoughts, either personally or, professionally, kind of how it's been.
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic really was a challenging time, not only for the 22nd Assembly District, but for our state and country. And who would have thought, 18 plus months that we would have to shelter in, that we would have to have a max vaccination, system, and then also, be in a point where at first, when the pandemic hit, we thought that New York State would go through a depression, and that we would have to cut services, and we would have to really go through austerity or more austerity budget. But luckily, we had stimulus packages after stimulus incentives that really helped bolster the economy, provide economic relief for the common individual, and really come through with a session that I believe was the most progressive session in the history of at least my short tenure in the New York State Assembly. We were able to implement many programs, such as the Excluded Workers Fund, programs for small businesses, and in addition, provide record funding to our schools and implement universal pre-K system here on Long Island. That's going to be a pathway to truly universal pre-K in our community. So to me, at first the session was bleak, but as we closed the session and gavelled out, I think that we should be, as a legislation, we should be very proud of the work that we've done to really try to improve a system, a world that really was upside down just a few months ago.
Yeah. Oh, no, that is certainly something that I don't think anyone can argue with. And, understanding, again, how much was needed to keep, society in a sense afloat during these darkest hours. And knowing where we were this week, seeing that the Port Washington resident here from Long Island, who was the first person to get vaccinated, led this, sort of victory parade, as it were, in Manhattan, celebrating, all those the progress made. It really is something that, really, I don't know if we, kind of can fully appreciate in this moment, but history, I know certainly will look back and say, my God, thankfully some people were able to, hold the batten down the hatches and keep, like I said, things afloat during those moments. And I know your office, in addition to what happened in the legislative session, of course, some people don't realize how much constituent services kind of, activity was there, and whether it's Department of Labor, navigating OTDA and these different social services or HRA or whatever it is, that people are dealing with, that you guys are kind of on that front line. Because if they can't get in contact with, let's say, PSE GLI because of the storm, maybe they can get in contact with you and you guys can do some of that reach out and, food distributions, all that type of stuff. So maybe you just want to talk about how that played directly into, kind of meeting the needs of your constituents.
Definitely. Last year we were in the middle of session, and essentially when we all sheltered in, everything closed down in our Albany office. But we quickly transitioned to doing on the ground work in our community. One thing that I noticed right on the onset of the pandemic was that we're going to have a huge insecurity problem. Not only because people were losing their jobs, people were being laid off and furloughed, but because the food systems in our country actually totally failed and crumbled.
Yeah.
If you went to the supermarket, remember, the shelves were empty. Food wasn't coming in. The farmers weren't able to bring their produce and their milk and products downstate. I know the fishermen out in Long Island weren't even able to sell the fish that they were catching. And so, my team and I soon realized that we had to come up with some sort of, food distribution system. Thankfully, we had a great relationship with Long Island Cares, which is a food bank here on Long Island.
Great organization.
Oh, wonderful organization. The executive director, Paul Patrick, was really open to our ideas about implementing a food distribution right in our community, so that people didn't have to travel far away. And also, in addition, many of the food pantries were empty. So we were able to, with Long Island Care, actually implement a food distribution that really serviced, I think every week we serviced more than 200 to 300 people. It was unbelievably humbling to see how people were coming in, asking for food, talking about their issues. But that wasn't the only issue that was happening, as everyone knows. As I said, people were being laid off. And so, unfortunately, the unemployment situation was devastating. And our office, we had to actually be now a conduit for people to get contact with unemployment. They had system failures, and record unemployment caused them to really their systems really to crash. And so I want to be nice, because obviously it's record unemployment. We've never seen anything like this. Even they were unable to fulfill the capacity of taking cases, and so we had to be a conduit for that. And thankfully, I have to thank my team, because literally we were working 24 hours to try to get people support and help. I've had people contact me during the pandemic in the middle of the night crying because they weren't able to access unemployment and get money, and it was just terrible. But we were there, not only helping them reach unemployment, but also be a lending ear. It was a very trying time, a very traumatic time. I tell you, I'm still traumatized, And at the end of the day, we were there just to be an open, ear, to listen to people's concerns, and just to be a shoulder to cry on. And really, I have to thank my team for helping us facilitate that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Shout out to the staff, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, trying to help people just feel like they're not alone in those moments.
Correct.
And have somebody to advocate for them, in that, again, very tumultuous, kind of situation. So that's important. And I know we did speak with your colleagues. It was Assemblywoman Kimberly Jean-Pierre about, how she had contracted COVID very early on in the session. And I know we also spoke with Assemblywoman Taylor Darling, talking about when, she happened to see her up in Albany, and, she was like, oh, stay away from me. And she was like confused, like, what's going on? And then, now we see, what kind of happened afterwards. And thankfully, she's okay. And, it just really was something that I don't think there's any real comparable kind of point of relation for anyone who's around now. But
it's amazing, because, I remember doing a press conference with Laura Curran and other elected officials in the beginning of the pandemic, and we're standing right next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, no mask, no protection. And looking back at that picture, it was amazing that we didn't know what it was initially, and we weren't taking the precautions. But thankfully, I didn't contract COVID. We quarantined and all that, but it was amazing that we didn't know what it was, but we still were able to, advocate, and people were just, they complied. Like, it was amazing that New Yorkers, realized that they needed to take care of each other, and they weren't selfish, and they all worked together for this common cause. And I really have to thank all New Yorkers and all essential workers who, were helping us really, ensure that we were safe. It was amazing.
Amen. Of course. And knowing, especially like you said in that beginning, it was that kind of like 9/11-esque feeling where no matter, if you hated each other yesterday, at least for the time being, we were all on the same team. We were all just trying to get through it and support those people, like you said, who were on the front lines, healthcare workers and other essential workers from, all the other sectors of the economy. So, all right. That is, again, a good bit of context there for your and your staff's experience with the COVID, public health response, but also, in terms of the economic recovery, that's a big part of it too. But I guess maybe to tie into back to legislative session, you want to talk about how, I know it's kind of a bit old news now, but the budget, how much that played, like you said, into, trying to meet those needs. And then we'll kind of segue into, I know it's at the federal level, the infrastructure bill, which is being talked about. And I know you've been a big advocate for things like childcare and these other things that are being discussed as, are they, essential for infrastructure? So I'm certainly, I'm sure our audience is interested in your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. Well, we know that a budget is a moral-based document. In our state, we've allocated 100 and, well, our budget's now more than that, but, typically our budget's $175 billion every year. And this session, we actually expanded on the budget. We went to 200 billion because we needed to show that we value people and that we need to invest in the individual. And I always tell people that infrastructure is not, brick and mortar. It is, but at the end of the day, we need to also invest into the care economy. There's a whole economy of taking care of the common people, whether it's from the womb to the tomb. Caring for individuals is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And one point, which is vitally important to myself, is that earlier years and taking care of those children early on. And talking back about the pandemic, it's interesting because many of the childcare facilities were struggling with sheltering in. It required people to keep their kids in their homes. And in addition, with the COVID and CDC protocols, many of these childcare businesses, and we have to remember they are businesses, had to comply to these rules and regulations, which caused them to reduce the amount of children that they had to care for. So it was like a perfect storm. They didn't have enough kids, and then in addition, they couldn't take care of all the kids that they had because they had to reduce their capacity. And so at the end of the day, in our budget, we've allocated money to our childcare system because it was kind of failing. And we know that if we don't have childcare, people can't go to work, businesses don't have employees. And so it's important that we invest into that childcare system. And so, really, we advocated for that in the budget. We were able to do so, and also able to allocate monies for historical funding for education, which is also vitally important to myself. Education really, they were struggling at first. Schools had to shut down, and then when they opened, they had to comply to all these protocols, which is expensive. Cleaning supplies, tablets. It was just a complete mess. And I know I'm straying off because really, it was really the perfect storm. So in the budget, we allocated a lot of money for that. For education and for early childcare.
Yeah, the foundation aid, of course. I know everyone's been talking about how essential it was, expecting, potential cuts in that, year. But then, seeing that, thankfully, like you said, the record-breaking impact, knowing how much we need to invest, in education, seeing that we had this year where a lot of people, we don't want to see them fall through the gaps, of course, or anything like that. So
I think that's critical. What Jon just said, things falling through the gaps. We got the COVID, we lived through that year, and we saw, I think, anybody that talks about childcare, they hit the nail right on the head, because everything stops if that doesn't work. Everything. We figured out who the frontline people were, who the important people to our everyday lives are. People stocking supermarket shelves. I don't think anybody felt that way before this. No. And again, I just feel like we're prone to forget it as time goes on. Somebody will come to you a year from now and say, "Why'd you spend so much money on childcare? Well, why did you? Oh, wait a minute. Did you forget we had this massive, problem?" And sadly, people will. Don't forget.
You already see it as well. You see it because I see many big businesses. They're not giving any sort of incentives to their workers anymore. They've pulled away those pandemic incentives, the extra pay, the hazard pay, and they're also in the same turn saying, "Oh, well, we can't find people to work for us." And it's because they're not paying people enough, and people are realizing they're putting their life on the line by doing simple things such as stocking shelves or taking care of a customer. because they're able, they have they're prone to, contracting some type of virus. And they're realizing that they don't want to, lose their life for a menial amount of money. They actually want to be a part of something. And so many of these big businesses who don't treat their employees well are having difficulty finding individuals to work for them.
That's an interesting point.
They're forgetting that, these are essential workers.
Yeah, no, we did speak recently with Newsday's labor reporter, Victor Ocasio, and, he broke down that discussion, from both the employer and the employee perspective. And we know that kind of goes back to these historical kind of back and forths between, management, ownership, and kind of the traditional rank and file workers. But certainly, we don't want people to be pushed into situations that, kind of don't give them the value that they put in. And I think that that's something that hopefully, a lot of workers have realized post-pandemic, whether it's, the right to either work from home or have more flexibility, because, like you alluded to, life is fluid, whether it's, childcare, taking care of elders, or a million other things that, kind of enrich our lives and, are the reasons why we work to then actually live. If you don't get that because you're kind of not getting kind of due worth, then I think it's a legitimate question to ask, or consider.
And that's why I tell people we need to focus on our small businesses.
Yeah.
They are the cornerstones of our community, and they have been through a lot due to COVID-19. And so within our budget, we've actually allocated $100 million for pandemic small business recovery.
Mm-hmm.
It's a grant program that small businesses and for-profit independent art and cultural organizations that were impacted by the pandemic can get access to. And so I tell people to apply for these grants. They're flexible, and they can be used for different needs such as payroll, rent, mortgage payment, taxes, utilities, personal protective equipment, or other expenses that were incurred between March 1st of 2020 and April 1st of 2021. Yeah. So, small businesses, micro businesses, employer, businesses that have 100 and fewer employees can get access to this money. And I tell them, please apply for them.
Of course.
This is an investment into our community. And we know that for every dollar that we give to small businesses, they produce $7 to $10 of economic benefit. So I tell people, let's forget about the big businesses. Shop local, eat local. That's where you support your community.
Exactly. Those MWBEs and all these, places that, if the profit margin, doesn't look so good, they don't run away because they live here.
And what you just said about the small businesses has been true forever. It didn't just become true after COVID. Correct. It was before that, and the classic example I use is people ask me, when you need something for your kitchen, where do you go? And I said, the first place I go is to my local hardware store, the mom and pop at the end of the block. If they don't have it, then I've got, then I have to acquiesce and go to the big box stores. But my first choice would be them. Because of what you said. I would rather, and they actually pay their taxes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that.
Exactly. I'm a little shaded Amazon there and some other, I'm sure, big companies. But no, your point is
put
right.
it where it belongs.
And I think that, that clearly that this pandemic has reshaped, hopefully, people's perspectives on things like supporting local business, also mental health and all these other issues that, weren't, maybe at the forefront. Hopefully, as we've said, Bill, that they stay there where they deserve. So, moving forward, just in terms of, just to stick on the child care and the specific care economy kind of point. I know you did author a couple pieces of legislation. I know some did pass either one house, or I know one piece did go for both houses, and is on the governor's desk right now, awaiting for approval, if I'm correct. But the point is that you had A 3631, which established a child care and early education sector on the Economy Act, and A 5102, which would establish authority for early child care savings accounts. So in theory, how would those, better, again, parents and families' lives?
So talking about the savings program, it's really a great initiative. It started in San Francisco, and what they did was provide a saving account to every child that was enrolled in kindergarten. And so, so that savings account, they would, the municipality would invest, it could be something small, into a savings account that only the child had access to when they graduated upon high school. And they could use that money for college or for career use. So if they want to go into a vocational school, they could do that as well. And so the thought behind that is that, we know that, saving money slowly will incur interest, and that would be a basis for that student to be able to afford college. They saw that a lot of parents weren't able to save money for many different reasons, especially parents of low income. And so having a dedicated saving account where the child can learn to save money and help them, be able to afford, college or, items for college or for career.
Makes sense.
And so in San Francisco, it's a very successful program. They started about 12 years ago. And so children who went into kindergarten now are actually getting access to money that they saved long time ago. And the money's in a lockbox, so it was only for them. The parents couldn't have access to it because
that's a great idea. That's a really great idea.
I'm a mom. Someone gives me $5. I put it in their bank account. But some parents, they need to pay light bills or food, electricity. Unfortunately, money goes there. They have that money. So that program is an excellent program. It's actually starting to gain traction. There's other municipalities that enacted that. I know New York City actually wants to start that program. And so I put in legislation to see if we could do that on a statewide level so that every young child will have a bank account. And it also builds financial literacy. It's amazing what it could do, educating a child about their finances early on. It's amazing what it could do in the future for them just being educated about financing, that, having that knowledge that, you have money in the bank and you could save. It's something empowering to young people. And I see young people who do that flourish.
Yeah,
it's wild. As you're talking about that, I remember being, I was in grade school long before you guys were born, but they actually, I think second or third grade. And I remember we would have our bank book and they would do it in the classroom. So it became part of the curriculum. We learned, and the banks loved it because, they got to get all this money from little kids, and they could,
potential new customers.
But nobody really followed through. It wasn't something that was going to follow us all the way to our senior year in high school. Which, from the sound of your program, it might. That's terrific.
It definitely, and if we had a public bank, we could get that money.
Now you're talking.
Save money. Yeah.
Now you're talking.
For another day.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Certainly a long conversation about payday lenders and other things I look forward to having. But just the other piece that was, related to childcare, but I think it was a little more nuanced. And this was the piece of legislation that, if I'm correct again, is on the governor's desk, A966, which related to the regulations for work search requirements for unemployment benefits to be considerate basically of childcare responsibilities. So what are your thoughts on the prospects of that passing, and why would that be so important for Governor Cuomo to sign that?
So I'm confident that this is going to get done because, again, with the conversation about childcare, if you don't have childcare, it's very hard to look for a job. And so typically when you file for unemployment, you're required to look for work. And there are some exemptions or some, rules that allow you to, if you can't look for work 1 week, you're not going to lose your unemployment check. And so this bill would say that if that 1 week you were not able to find childcare, or you were not able to have, childcare for, an extended period of time, you're not punished. And I tell people, no, you still have to look for work. But this just says that if that one day you were supposed to go to interview and then your childcare fell through, you're not going to get punished financially. And it basically says that the unemployment would have the jurisdiction to look at your work search requirements and say, okay, if you were not able to work, go to that interview on Monday, you are not going to get punished. Just reschedule the interview for next week. It just gives that leeway for unemployment to say, okay, you didn't have childcare, it's okay. You're not going to lose your financial standing. You're not going to lose hope. You're at least, you have a lifeline. And so I'm confident that Governor Cuomo will support this legislation because it's common sense legislation. We wrote it in a way that would give, the unemployment office the ability to look at case-based individuals' work search history. And it's just common sense because we know that childcare is so vital and it's so expensive, and for some people it's not not sustainable. And so this bill will allow working mothers and working fathers to be able to, have some financial standing.
Okay, great. Thanks for
That's
that
excellent.
information. We certainly, again, urge listeners to go look into that bill for themselves. Again, 8966. And then just in the time we still have remaining, and let's remind our listeners, they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo. Thankfully, still joined by Assemblywoman Michaelle Solages for a little while longer here. Let's segue to some of the other pieces of legislation that I know you were certainly championing, and I believe passed both houses. I think it was A3412, which related to deportation proceedings and some coercive, concerns about that process. Could you just kind of give maybe the simplified version of, what that would do and what the issue was for maybe folks who weren't so familiar?
So we all know that, immigration is so vital to New York State. We have one of the largest populations of foreign-born individuals throughout the country. We are the melting pot, excuse me. And so, it's important to realize that, immigrants, new Americans are essential to our economy and essential to our communities. They're our business owners, they're our neighbors, our friends. And so what I saw happening frequently was that, people were using their immigration status to extort them for several reasons. And for example, I had a situation in my district where a landlord wanted to evict a family, and they knew that the father was a new American and that he didn't have documentation.
Okay.
So the landlord actually threatened the family. They said that if you don't leave now, I'm going to call ICE. And this was during a time where the federal administration was not friendly to immigrants. Obviously, there were a lot of deportation proceedings. ICE was, doing a lot of raids. And so I submitted legislation to say that if a person is basically threatening an individual for their immigration status, that they could, in trouble, they could get arrested and it could be prosecuted. And that's a simple version. We want to make sure that we're sending a message that extortion and, threatening individuals is not acceptable. And that especially if you're threatening someone and trying to say that, we're going to deport you, it's unacceptable. That's not what New York is about. We are the melting pot, and we have to ensure that, threats of deportation are not acceptable. So we want to write it specifically in the law and say that, we want to write a statute to say, saying that the person is going to get deported is actually a crime and it's illegal. The law was not very clear. So, attorney generals really couldn't, persecute someone or prosecute someone on that. And so we want to make it crystal clear because we saw many instances, especially during the Trump administration, of people threatening people for their immigration status.
Yeah. And especially I know, concerns about when people would go up to court or go to court proceedings and, the concern of deportation, then stopping people from going and appearing and then making these, kind of legal issues even more kind of worse and snowball further. So that was another law that we actually was signed by the governor last year. It would protect our courthouses because what was happening was that ICE agents were standing at our courthouses, and they were looking for people who were on the deportation list. It was crazy because people would, citizens, New Yorkers, we know that courts, regardless of your immigration status, you have access to the courts. You should be able to go to court, for a parking ticket or to point out to your accuser or to defend yourself and not have to worry about being deported. And so what was happening is that ICE agents were sitting in the courthouses, and if they saw the person that they wanted to send, send to deportation, they would actually disrupt court proceedings, grab the person, and bring to the car and drive them, to jail. Insane, and this just disrupt the court system. And so court cases happen. The Office of Court Administration actually made a blanket rule that ICE agents couldn't, enforce the law within the courthouses. And so ICE agents actually moved to outside of the courts, which is crazy. Look, when people were walking to court or getting out of their car to go to court,
the ICE agents would grab them, and almost it seemed like a kidnapping. They wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't even identify themselves, and they would grab individuals and put them in back of a car and drive away and put them through deportation proceedings. And so we actually in the state codified in law that a person cannot or ICE agents or federal agents can't obtain people as they are going to and from court.
Okay, that's important for people to know. And yeah, that's what I had thought. I know this new piece of legislation to build off of that kind of larger issue that, like you said, the state did address in the previous legislative.
The initial assumption by somebody reading a story about that is that the immigrant may be in court because of something they did, but they could also have been a witness in another trial that just got stopped because you stole my witness, basically, is what
exactly.
They didn't care who it was or what they're
No, the victims of domestic violence, people who saw crime, witnesses of crimes, trafficking, even someone who was going for a parking ticket, were all obtained by ICE, and ICE didn't follow state regulations, or they just didn't care. They just wanted to, they just had a quota that they needed to come to abide by. They just wanted people deported, and they just didn't care about any sort of state sovereignty. And it's unbelievable that we had to pass a law to tell ICE that courthouses are safe locations.
Well, of course, and given the we'll say
good thing you did.
But knowing the previous administration and the kind of conflict they had, especially with New York City, and anyone that declared themselves as a sanctuary city, how that kind of had repercussions politically and also for the population there. So, okay, thanks for laying that out. Just maybe in those last little bit of time we have here with you, I guess there were some other pieces of legislation that I know you're passionate about that do play maybe more into the child care and the second shift kind of issues that you focus on. In terms of it looks like A988, which would require the State Department of Health to conduct a study on the effects of racial and ethnic disparities in infant mortality rate. And there was another one, too, that would require DOH to review in breastfeeding rates. So I know that that's something we've talked about, again, with the Assemblywoman Kimberly Jean-Pierre and some of the other electeds. So you want to tell us again, or just to our listeners, just again, who don't understand maybe why that's so important, what that's all about.
Birth is such an important time in a family's life. And it's unfortunate because, Black women are more likely to die due to childbirth and postpartum issues. If you look at, we're talking about Long Island, people think this might be a New York City issue, but actually in Long Island, more Black women are dying at childbirth than in New York City. And the disparities are greater. So for instance, if you look at a community such as Roosevelt or Freeport or Hempstead, more women are dying compared to a community like Merrick, and they're right next to each other. More women are dying in Hempstead than in Garden City, and they're right next to each other. More people are dying in Elmont than in Floral Park. So there's this great disparity. And this is something that, being a mother myself, I saw that, there was just implicit bias in our medical system, that when Black women complained about pain, they were disregarded. And so, I wanted to look at this. I'm an evidence-driven person. I'm a data person. And so, I put in those two pieces of legislation because I wanted the facts. I wanted the details. I wanted us as a state to interview stakeholders and get their ideas of how we can decrease this infant mortality and, maternal mortality amongst women. And so one aspect of that is looking at infant mortality, because we know that if the infant is dying, there's an issue there in the system, because as we know, we're a first world country, so infants shouldn't be dying in childbirth. And in addition, women weren't breastfeeding, and we want to see why they're not breastfeeding, because we know that breastfeeding requires a lot of time. It requires paid family leave, which we have in New York State. We have 12 weeks of paid family leave, but we don't have that federally. So we wanted to look at what are the issues of why women, especially Black women and Latino women, are not being able to breastfeed.
Okay, yeah, and I know we talked about it in the context of racial equity, and I know there was a bill, I believe, again, that Assemblywoman Darling had been the prime sponsor of in terms of racism as a public health crisis, and that kind of interplay of these types of things, and even leading to some things like vaccine hesitancy, in terms of this kind of medical alienation of people of color, because of not respecting their bodies and their medical needs maybe as much on face value as other populations. I know we talked about the opioid crisis, and there have been issues with doctors overprescribing medications apparently to people of color because they believed inherently that there was some kind of higher pain threshold, which has no real basis in reality, but culturally
we've seen time and time again that blacks and Latinos were discriminated in the healthcare industry, whether it's the gynecological experiments that were done on black women to see how their system works, or there was experiments with syphilis that were done down south primarily on black individuals. There's always been that hesitancy for the black community to really fully be able to get adequate healthcare. And that's a disparity that we still have to overcome. And even if we see what we're talking about, the COVID-19 vaccine, many people in our communities are really hesitant about getting the vaccine because they don't want to be experimented on. Or they say that, this is something that, the disparity is due to COVID-19. They were left behind, and that they don't believe that they don't want to have access to that because they don't believe in the medical system. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah.
Yes. So, there is a challenge, but I tell people get vaccinated because it's so important, not only because you're stopping the virus from mutating, but also it decreases the chance of death. And that's the ultimate goal. You might get sick. I tell people there is a chance that you might contract COVID-19, but at the end of the day, you don't want to die from it. And so I've been telling people, just get vaccinated. It's something that, is so important to our community, and that we want to get out of this pandemic for economic reason, but we also want to ensure that our neighbors serve this. And the only way to do that is to get vaccinated. Of
course. And especially considering, other public health issues that have been longstanding in terms of, higher rates and prevalencies of things like, diabetes and, food deserts and all these other issues. It's certainly important that you get vaccinated to, give yourself the best chances if, God forbid you were infected, at least the outcome would much, higher probability of being better for you and anyone else that you happen to get infected. So, okay, thanks for clarifying that. And I know we do have to wrap here in a moment, but I just wanted to get one maybe quick. I know it's a big conversation, but maybe kind of little short answer of in terms of the PSEG LIPA contract that obviously broke last week and caught a lot of people off guard because a lot of calls were being made both from electeds, from activists, and even from LIPA itself for public power. Is that something that you would support, and is this caught you off guard, and how do you feel about this in a soundbite or two?
Yeah, so I believe in public power. We need municipalize. PSE&G had many opportunities to harden their system to actually provide a service to the ratepayers. And unfortunately, they failed. I was there during the 2012 restructuring of LIPA after Hurricane Sandy, and because I wasn't confident that privatize or having a public-private model worked. And I am a little surprised that LIPA is working with PSE&G and decided that they want to reauthorize the contract. But I've had conversations with LIPA regarding the new rules and the new initiatives that they're working with PSE&G. But at the end of the day, we need to get away from PSE&G and actually look for an initiative where we could be a public. We have public power here on Long Island. We just need it. It's just not working, and it's insanity that we're going back and doing the same thing. But at the end of the day, yeah. But I think our systems are so commingled with PSE&G, as you know, that many of the systems and the employees were in New Jersey and not Long Island. So we can't sever that relationship immediately. And so I understand that, and I understand that we need to reauthorize the contract. But at the end of the day, our goal should be having public power. We should be going to that model, whether if it's 2-3 years, whenever the contract expires. I think it expires in 2025. We should be at the point where we should have public power. That should be our goal, and I really truly believe that. And
Yeah.
I'll take the medicine now, but we need to get there.
Understood. I know you made very strong comments too in regards to LI American Water. In a similar vein, I know that discussion is happening. Exactly. That's the response that anyone who happens to be their ratepayer feels. But in terms of water and these commodities being in a sense human rights, and not these commodities that kind of can be just played with, for profit.
We shouldn't be people shouldn't be profiting off of utilities. It just doesn't work. The model doesn't work. I have ratepayers for water, and they're paying some of the highest water rates with American Water and getting substandard service, getting brown water and not good customer service. And so, we really need to look at ourselves. We need to look ourselves in the face and say, okay, this is not working. We shouldn't be profiting off of water and electricity, and we should be going towards models.
And I'm hoping that same logic gets translated to healthcare.
Amen for that. Yeah, I agree. It's ridiculous. I just recently had a baby. And it's funny. My insurance company is fighting with my hospital, so I was getting these enormous bills, and now I have to fight with the insurance company and the hospital, even though I have private insurance. Yeah. And at one point, I actually had to move pediatricians because my pediatrician no longer took my health insurance. I shouldn't be thinking about that when I have a newborn. And it's funny, as you said, healthcare is a right, and we need to have the New York Healthcare Act implemented here in New York State and have a national motto as well, because no one should have to worry about healthcare. We should just be able to be like other countries, and a person just goes to the doctor, and the insurance company and the hospital and the doctor take care of all the billing stuff.
Oh, you mean like all the other countries?
Many.
All of the industrialized nations in the world have nationalized healthcare. We don't.
Yeah,
it's insane. It's insane because insulin should be free. I tell people it's insanity that people. We're in America. We're paying some of the highest cost of insulin, and in other countries, it's not even an issue. It's despicable. We should be ashamed of ourselves.
That the market can be at the whims of someone like Pharma Bro, as he was known. Exactly. Certainly, I think there's a lot of kind of change and further controls to help the public. I think that are likely to be pursued, and people like you, it's good to see that are in kind of the position to be those advocates for folks who do believe, what we just kind of discussed there. So just to close, I know, again, thank you for all your time, but it's not an easy topic to segue to, but you, as we did allude to, were the first Haitian American who has been elected to the New York State legislature. And unfortunately, this week, Haiti was in international news and locally, how it impacts the Haitian community here, the assassination of the president. Again, in your native Haiti. So could you just again share some of your thoughts on what I guess comes next and what Long Islanders need to know in a sense about the situation?
Yeah, I think people are shocked and appalled by the assassination of the Haitian president, Jovenel Moïse, because we don't want to promote violence. And, there was many constitutional issues that were going on. There's a lot of political instability happening in Haiti, with the government. Recently, Parliament was dissolved by the president. The president implemented a new the deceased president implemented a new prime minister. The head of the Supreme Court actually died of COVID-19 last week. The government is essentially non-existent. And so, with the assassination of the president, it leaves Haiti in a political vacuum where there's not only constitutional issues as who is the next in line, but there's other issues that are happening in Haiti where there's lack of leadership. There's a surge in COVID-19. There's poverty. There's famine. There's just instability. And so what's happening in Haiti is that with the assassination of the president, it's not just about one individual, but it's about the political vacuum that is being created. That's really disheartening. And so locally, many people of Haitian descent are upset. They're heartbroken, but they're not shocked because we know that there's just many issues going on right now in Haiti. And so what's next for the island nation is that we need to ensure that the people of Haiti have sovereignty over their country. There's a lot of foreign intervention that's had happened in Haiti, especially after the earthquake in 2010. Many organizations and countries came and ripped the resources that were supposed to be allocated to the Haitian people. And the Haitian people were not able to govern themselves because they were not given the capacity to govern themselves. And so right now we're in a critical point where, it might, we either might turn to peace, prosperity, or we might fall into a hole of violence and, instability. So, people of Haitian descent are upset and sad, but we hope that, we can move forward to a better direction, but it needs to be led by the Haitian people. I tell people we need to stop this intervention.
Right.
Self-determination.
Correct. Yeah. But Biden right now, just recently, sent in, 10,000, troops, American troops into Haiti to try to see if they can, provide some sort of support, which, we always want to keep the peace, but I hope that there's not this intervention that's happened in the past with like under and other, presidents, but really, Haiti needs to be given sovereignty. So I hope that, I tell the people that hopefully you get sovereignty, but I'm a state elected official. So all I can do is lobby my federal Congress people, the State Department and other, federal agencies to ensure that there's peace, but also that they're given latitude to govern themselves.
Of course. And I know that you were the first, again, Haitian state, legislator, but I know you're not the last because I know that the contingent has certainly grown while you've been in Albany.
Oh, correct. Yeah, there's 6 of us now. There's 6 in the assembly, and hopefully one day there's one in the state senate. We don't have that yet, but like I said, I was the first, but I'm not the last, and I'm glad for that.
Yeah, no, of course. And like I said, there's a very nuanced history, and we certainly, urge everyone to, keep Haiti and their thoughts in terms of, understanding that we don't want to see, these kind of mistakes repeated. We want to see a better reality, led by the Haitians, for control of their own country, and not some of the other things like we've seen in the past. So, okay, with that, I guess, we'll kind of leave it there. I will just say that I know you've been a big proponent also of this project called Plastic Free July, which we do recommend people check out your social media accounts and learn more about that. It is not an easy task, I will just tell you, but it's certainly one that's worth trying just to maybe learn the lesson of how not easy it is and, why that might be the problem it is in itself.
Yeah, plastic pollution is just so ingrained into our society. Every day we interact with a piece of plastic. So this month I tell people to just try the Plastic Free July challenge and try to reduce the amount of plastic that you're using in your life. And I tell people you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get rid of all plastic, but choose something. Whether if you go get your cup of coffee, you bring a reusable cup, or when you go to the supermarket, you don't use the produce bag, that you bring your own bags. Yep. Or I tell people, just to, stop, go to a bulk store and, or go to a farmer's market and buy your produce or other initiatives or other foods without plastic. I just say, try it. It's actually a great initiative. And every year I've been doing it, I've been reducing the amount of plastic in my life. And it's actually just wonderful seeing the economic benefit, but also the environmental benefit to it.
Of course. So we certainly recommend everyone to give it a shot.
I think if people were aware of how much plastic is actually in our bodies because we are so surrounded by plastic, they might be a little quicker reacting, but probably not.
Everything we see on the cleanups and stuff like that, of course. So like you said, we
even cosmetics.
Yeah.
Even cosmetics that you use have plastic in it.
The microbeads and stuff like that.
It's unbelievable. So I tell people just be cognizant of the plastic this July and try to reduce it.
Of course. So we definitely echo that. And I'll just plug one of the events I know that you do have coming up. If you have any other you want to mention, feel free to. But I know July 22nd, I believe you'll be having, if I'm not mistaken, a webinar with the Red Cross, I believe in New York, on emergency preparedness, which is certainly on mark for, the storm that we're having today and, the season of hurricanes, which is coming up. So certainly anyone should check that out. And just a reminder that you could follow the Assemblywoman on social media. The official account, I believe, is at Solages NY. And then also the first name, last name, Michaelle Solage on Twitter. And I'm sure some other platforms too, right?
Yeah, Solage NY on Instagram, Facebook, and also solageny.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. and get information what's happening on the state level and also what's happening locally in your community. So I just tell people Solage, SOLAGES-NY, on all social media platforms, or solageny.com.
Okay, perfect. And of course, if you're a constituent, you could always use the Google to find how to contact their office for any questions of constituent services. Even if you're not a constituent, they'll certainly put you in contact with your correct elected officials. So thank you so much.
Yes, really. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and spending the time. We really enjoyed it. But you got to promise to come back.
Oh, definitely. Anytime you allow me, I would love to come back and talk more.
Okay.
There's so much we have to cover.
Oh yeah, I know. And you have your fingers on that pulse of all that stuff. I know there's so many issues, but thank you for being diligent, being there. That's very cool.
Bill, John, it's been a pleasure, and I thank you. I look forward to seeing you in person, but also as well as just coming back on the program. And thank you for educating people in our community.
Oh, thank you for educating us.
Exactly. Learning together always. So, all right. Have a great rest of your weekend and summer, and good luck with everything. And like we said, we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Well, in a story by Matthew Chase, Newsday reported on Thursday that war heroes and their commanders returning from battle have been showered with ticker tape parade along New York City's Canyon of Heroes since the 19th century. So have kings and queens and princes and prime ministers and presidents and Olympians. Well, on Wednesday, the ticker tape was for the often anonymous workers who helped get the region through the coronavirus pandemic. The nurses, the doctors, the testers and tracers, the orderlies, the bodega cashiers, the transit operators and conductors, the cops, the firefighters, the jail guards, the food deliverers, the sanitation workers, and other frontline workers. After this crazy year that we had, said North Shore University Hospital surgical intensive care nurse Samantha Paez of Huntington, I'm so grateful that we're all alive, we're healthy, and we get to celebrate. Well, healthcare workers, teachers, union workers, police officers, firefighters, everybody had a hand to get to where we are now. It was during one of the pandemic's worst months, April 2020, when so many were dying that refrigerated morgue trucks were parked outside hospitals, that Mayor Bill de Blasio promised the city would emerge from the darkness by celebrating at some point in the future with a ticker tape Hometown Heroes parade. Well, that day came Wednesday, with the rates of infection, hospitalization, and death comparatively low and precipitously dropping for months. The parade grand marshal was Sandra Lindsay of Port Washington, a nurse and the first person in the United States to receive an approved COVID-19 vaccine. She waved to the thousands of spectators who gathered for the event, which started at 11 a.m. at Battery Park and winded uptown on Broadway to City Hall. It just means everything to us, she said, seated on the back of a vintage 1952 convertible. Over a loudspeaker from a stage near City Hall, de Blasio recognized each category of worker finishing the route. Thank you, hero, he said at one point to no one in particular. Well, Juanita Goitin, a nurse at the Nassau University Medical Center in East Meadows Emergency Department, also worked through the pandemic and noted the devastating toll. More than 42,000 in New York State alone. Well, the parade came after a year of unspeakable pain and loss for New York City and the region, where lockdown restrictions to stop the virus spread meant those who died in hospitals and nursing homes could often not say goodbye to loved ones in person. Yeah, well, that was the hardest thing. There was quite a few people I know that had to go through that, and it's bad enough having to make what we would call end of life decisions, and then have that wrench thrown at you.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, it's never easy, that type of situation, but just the insurmountable kind of intensity of not being able to be around your loved one, while they're kind of in their final hour, or just kind of going through it, not sure, whether they'll make it out the other side. That's anyone who dealt with this directly. They'll tell you that, even more the times than the harm from the virus to themselves, knowing that their family members, were kind of in a sense of helplessness, even with the best frontline workers that were available, especially at the beginning, this was all new, novel, and there just wasn't any type of playbook on how to really, kind of address it. But it is amazing to think, how time moves, and how when we, started these conversations, maybe 2 years ago or so, when people were just saying, oh yeah, there's this thing to maybe start looking as maybe a concern, whatever it was, November, December of, I guess, 2019, and then you figure, what's it really going to be like? But then to see it kind of come full circle, and, we're not fully out of it at its entirety with these variants that people are looking at, obviously, but at the same time, to think that we can have these parades and that we can talk with these elected officials and these folks, not solely about the kind of disaster of COVID, but how we rebuild and how we are resuming the everyday life things that we took for granted, like going to a baseball game or the Islanders game, or just every little thing.
And there's a thing that we all discovered just exactly who essential workers were.
Yeah,
like people who stock grocery store shelves,
and
truck drivers, and, and all of
home care providers.
People. I just think it's isn't it the human condition? People say, well, we need to learn history so we don't repeat it. And my thought was, what? We learn history, and what do we learn from history? That we always repeat it.
It's a fair point.
I mean, it just seems to be, so now we have a pandemic, and the last big one that we had, people obviously learned stuff. Did they remember that stuff? Doesn't seem like it.
I mean, that's the concern, that these issues, if you think back, we've talked about before with a number of experts like the health commissioner, the Spanish flu, and a lot of the things that were being kind of used, against this were, kind of low tech methods. But if they work, then, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But then you do see, modern technology come into play, and things like RNA vaccines, in addition to the traditional, kind of J&J, I guess, kind of regular vaccines that had been out there for a while. It really was an all hands on deck situation, something that I don't know, again, if anyone who's alive has really seen. 9/11 was there, I guess World War II, in the sense of, trying to, especially at the beginning, as things went on, things became more, in a sense, political. They became more divisive, and they came, obviously more nuanced and complicated, which is understandable. But at the beginning, to just see, people of all races, creeds, anything, that kind of that 9/11 feel of, what? I don't care if I hated you yesterday. We're all in this together. We'll fight about and quabble over little things later, but right now, let's support the people who are doing that life-saving work, and life-sustaining work. Even like you said, like grocery workers or EMTs or nurses or anyone who kind of really didn't have the luxury of staying home and having that security physically and mentally. So, but the one thing though, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no.
I'll just say that the one thing is that this nurse, Sandra Lindsay, it is interesting and certainly a point of pride. I think most would say that she will forever be in the history books as connected to Long Island. As connected to the hospital which you work for, which is the Northwell system, even though it's right over the Queens border. But her herself being obviously a Port Washington resident, I'm sure that probably won't be the only parade that she's the Grand Marshal of in the near future. But certainly, it's very fascinating to think that we were at the tip of the spear of the disaster, but in theory, hopefully, also the tip of the spear of the recovery.
And the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move on out of here. We thank you for joining us and remind you that you can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 p.m. right here on the station that helps you communicate, 90.3 WHPC.